Hey everybody, Erin from the Impatient Gardener, and believe it or not, I'm here with a spring tour. I don't actually know if I've ever done a proper spring tour in this garden, in part because this time of year the garden is a bit of a mess. You know how it is this time of year, we're all really busy, and so things get a little disheveled. But I have to say, parts of this garden are looking so pretty at this time of year that I wanted to make sure to show it to you. And the part I'm showing you first here is the new garden. We're standing in the new garden that we made last year. And in part because it's just so much better than it was, which was weeds. And also some of the perennials are coming up. But I did a lot of bulb planting last year, if you remember. And because I chose mostly early to mid blooming bulbs this year, everything is pretty much in full flower at one time, and I'm so happy with that decision. So let me show you around a little bit in this garden. So first of all, you guys remember that I planted big clumps of all these bulbs, and so we've got muscari, we've got jetfire daffodil, and another daffodil. And I will put names on the screen, you guys, because I can't remember off the top of my head what everything was. But I just dug these in with a shovel rather than planting them all individually. And what I think this does is makes this garden look a lot older than it really is, because obviously we know that bulbs sort of clump with age. So if you clump them from the get-go, you sort of build in maturity into a garden. So there are a few daffodils that have come through on the path. These are daffodils that were already in this garden. I've just been leaving them. I don't mind them at all. If they want to bloom there, that's fine. And there isn't much to show in terms of plants actually growing here, except for this beautiful pulmonaria. This is Diane Claire. It's got a very white leaf on it. Such a pretty plant. Pulmonaria is underused, I think. So as we come around, we've got the small serviceberry that had actually been planted here 2 years ago is just coming into bloom, which is always pretty. And there's a little bit of work to do on the path. There's some grass coming through. These are all sort of minor things. If you look beyond me, that purple foliage is penstemon. That's Pocahontas. And that purple foliage, I had no idea. I mean, I didn't plant that for the spring color, but boy, what a difference that makes. The shrub you see here is Cornus mass, which is just coming out of flower now, so that's what you're seeing there. And then all these other perennials coming up. So I just want to stop in the middle of the bridge here, because the best part about this garden has nothing to do with me. So if you look, I think, this way, what you'll see is this sort of river of yellow. Now, of course, this is where we have a little creek. I call it a creek. It's really drainage, you guys. And it runs all throughout our property. But the yellow flower you see there is marsh marigold. None of those were planted by me. And they just fill in their boggy plant. They love the wetland. And to me, it's my very favorite wildflower. So you just can't go wrong with that beautiful yellow. This way, what you'll see is, well, some weeds that need to be taken care of in there. But as you look along the base of this, what's growing in there is actually forget-me-nots. Not that I planted them. And of course, forget-me-nots can run a little rampant, but they're right in essentially the creek bed there. And those will get those beautiful blue flowers, and I'm happy to let them do that. I do need to come in and clean off the edges a little bit here. That requires getting my boots out. So as we come up across the bridge here into the new garden, we've got more bulbs that are really the things, you know, making a show. Some of the jetfire daffodils are starting to wane a little bit now, but for the most part, this garden is looking pretty good. I think almost everything came back this year, so I'm very happy about that. Of course, there's going to be some weeds to be taken care of for the next several years before all these plants really knit together. So that's sort of a view of the new garden. Actually, let's just turn around. If you want to just turn around real quick and just take a look at it this way, because the view is so pretty looking this way. Okay, and then I'm going to show you what is happening in the vegetable garden. So here in the vegetable garden, you guys know what I've planted in here already, but the thing I want to show you is the bulbs. I am so happy with the great tulip show. So this side is better because it gets more light. So the other side, same tulips, just blooming a little bit later because there's more sun over here. But you guys, check this out. You know that I love tulips, and I can't grow them in many places because we've got deer and rabbits. So I planted this bulb mix. All the bulbs in my garden, by the way, are from Longfield Garden, including this tulip mix. And I did throw in another variety in this mix. I think I threw in the double that's in this mix. But this massive color, I can't tell you how many neighbors have commented on it, because we don't get tulips in our neighborhood because no one can grow them because of the deer. So if you put them behind a fence, you can. And as you make your way around the corner, you get to the back where I had the Belgian fence, the Belgian fence. And here we did all white tulips with little pink tulips popping up in the middle. So this is Emperor, a double and a single mix, all these white tulips. And the whole back is just filled with these beautiful white tulips, which have been blooming now for well over a week. It got warm, they came into bloom, and then it got cool, and they stuck around. There's not really much to show in the vegetable garden yet. The garlic is doing really well, and you saw in a video I planted up the sweet peas. I wouldn't say they've grown a ton, but they're looking good. And the peas are up, so that's good, most of them. So that's the vegetable garden, but you know, in the past I've grown bulbs in these 4 beds in the middle, and what you see there are leftovers from last year that I didn't pull out. Those will come out eventually, but I greatly prefer this idea of showing them along the sides. I'll show you this side just briefly so that you can see the difference in growth between the sort of sunny side and the shadier side. So you can see down here, all these are just starting to show a little bit of color, unlike the other side where they basically opened a day or two ago. So these are probably maybe 2 or 3 days behind the other one, just because of the amount of sun that they're getting in this part of the garden. Okay, so that's the vegetable garden. Now I'm just going to show you a couple other parts of the garden. There are parts of it that are looking pretty rough, but there are a lot of native plants that grow in this garden that I never show you. So I thought you might enjoy seeing some of the things that I had nothing to do with planting here, but that really make this garden beautiful this time of year. So the first area I want to show you is this area, and these are all Mayapples. Again, I didn't plant any of these. They've colonized here. Mayapples are these beautiful sort of umbrella-like foliage, and the flower is actually underneath them. They're not open yet. This is kind of a special area of the yard. Things grow here that don't grow anywhere else. Unfortunately, as it's gotten sunnier here, as we lost a few trees, some of the plants that were here don't grow here anymore. We used to have several trilliums growing in this area. I don't see them here anymore. We do have ramps here, which are delicious, and but mostly this is about these Mayapples, which are just they're just adorable, and they grow in these big colonies. I don't show you this area very often. This is I call it the woods. But this is our wooded area that we basically do nothing to. We've put a few trees in here as we've lost other trees, and I tend to plant a few things along the edge, and any daffodils you see in here I've popped in here. Everything else just manages itself here, and most of what this woods is skunk cabbage and ostrich ferns. The skunk cabbage is this big foliage. Any big foliage that you're seeing in here is this skunk cabbage, which is a really cool native plant. And then what you see here are the ostrich ferns. These grow at a rate I can't possibly describe to you, a foot this week easily. They get to be 6 to 7 feet tall in this area, and this whole area just you can't see anything through here. So we can see our neighbors and the lake beyond here right now, but very soon as these get bigger, within a month, that view will be completely obscured with these ostrich ferns. It's a beautiful look. I mean, I'd enjoy the view of the lake a little bit, but this is my favorite stage for these plants. I love the way they look when they're just starting to unfurl. And ostrich ferns, you have the fiddleheads, are edible. And I know a lot of you are going to ask me if I've tried them, and I have. And maybe I'm not cooking them right, but I don't find them to be particularly tasty. So no danger of me running out of ostrich ferns to eat in this garden. If you see a few blue flowers in here, along there you can see a few blue flowers coming in. That's Virginia bluebells. That is another native plant, Mertensia virginica. And I actually have that planted in parts of my garden as well. I find it to be a lovely ephemeral plant that in this here, it just manages itself. I never touch it. It comes up, it blooms. These are the first in my yard to bloom. So the ones that grow themselves and planted themselves in the woods in a spot that they obviously love, bloom first before any of the ones that I have actually put in my garden. But this is a really just sort of special spot, and I adore, I mean, these ferns are very thuggish. They do pop up in the grass. They run all over the place. We just mow them down because once they get going, once they're in a spot they like, they take over. I mean, I would conservatively guess there are, I don't know, thousands of ferns in here. But it is beautiful, and I particularly love this stage of them when they're just starting to unfold. So this is an area of the garden that I had at one point planted tons of only pinkish daffodils. You know, I find that some of those varieties don't naturalize as well, so not all of those have come back, but there's still quite a few of them down here of various shades of pink. I always find that definition of what a pink daffodil is to be sort of funny. I have to look up what, I think this is Thalia. This is maybe one of my very favorite daffodils. I think it's so adorable. It grows on in these little clusters, tiny little delicate blooms that sort of nod down. Just beautiful. The crabapple, to give you an idea of where we're at in our gardening season right now, you guys, this is a crabapple, and it's just starting to open up. So we've not had any trees blooming yet, except for that serviceberry that I showed you before. Then I just wanted to show you this area of the garden because you rarely see, this is a part I rarely show you. This is right along our little creek here, but there's a combination over here that I am particularly enamored with right now. And that is Brunnera growing here, and it is in full bloom. And of course, if you grow Brunnera, you know that you probably mostly grow it for the foliage. But these tiny little bright, truly blue flowers are absolutely not to be missed. And then we've got just the very fading flowers of this. This is Hylomecon japonica. This is a Japanese woodland poppy. And the combination of these two plants together, the blue, I mean, you can't beat blue and yellow, especially in springtime. There's something about that combination in spring that is so charming and just so wonderful. And this is this Hylomecon japonica is a fabulous plant. I learned about this from Margaret Roach on her blog. She wrote about it, and one of the things I learned about it is that you have to divide it. It won't spread itself. You have to divide it. So everything started with a clump here, and every year I dig it up and divide it, and I've been moving it around, and now I'm getting these sort of big clumps. And they're done after this. This is the end of the show after this. But a moment that I'm particularly just loving in spring. You know, I don't love yellow flowers in my garden a lot. I like to work them in certain colors of yellow, but to me in spring, I like yellow flowers. I just feel like it's so cheery, and it's just the bright shot of color that we all need after a very gray winter. So this part of the garden is under a little bit of construction right now. Right here we've got the tricolor beech that I planted last year. Again, you'll see not leafed out yet because that's where we are in spring. This had, over here I had two Incrediballs and an Invincible Spirit hydrangea growing here, but I got a hydrangea that I really, really wanted to grow. It's the one that's in this cage because I want to be extra careful and protect it quite a bit to really give it, I mean, it would be fine, but I just don't want it to get knocked back at all. This is called Haas Halo. It is an arborescence type hydrangea, but it has a lace cap and it has fertile flowers on it. So it's the same kind of hydrangea as Annabelle, except Annabelle has those big ball flowers and that's all infertile flowers. So there's nothing really there for pollinators. This has lacier flowers that has some fertile flowers in it. So it's a beautiful form. More and more I find myself really liking those lace cap hydrangeas. So I moved one of the Incredibles out of here. I relocated to another part of the garden. I moved the Invincible Spirit back a touch and I put that here for sort of pride of place. I wanted to have a nice spot right in the front here. Okay, now we're gonna move around over here. So this is what I call the shade garden. You're gonna say, well, it's in total sun. Well, that's because no leaves are out on trees yet. So this gets quite a bit of sun this time of year. And this is always an interesting garden for me because I built this garden out of tiny little plug plants. So there wasn't a lot of design to it, but there are gems in here. So what you see running around the ground here is actually sweet woodruff, which I love. I have it in a lot of places. It's a really practical plant. And you just pull it out where you don't want it. But coming through that are lots of little gems, like this beautiful epimedium right here, another pulmonaria. I've got a gold heart, bleeding heart coming up there. You'll see that my okay, what is the word of this plant? Oh my gosh, whatever. What is it? Lenten rose. Hellebore. My hellebore. Oh my gosh. My hellebores still have flowers on them. So, I mean, obviously these flowers are fading. I think this is one of the wedding party ones. But so the hellebores still have flowers on them here. As we come around this area, we get the very charming shredded umbrella plants coming up, which is like the best common name for a plant ever. And this is Uvularia grandifloria, a lovely little cute ephemeral there as well. And just all sorts of charming things coming from, some not so charming too. I've got a proliferation of lily of the valley there, which is not my personal favorite, and it does take over, but I'm picking my battles. But the beautiful thing about this part of the garden is that I love to look beyond it to see that beautiful new garden that we have over there, where there's all that color happening over there, with the bulbs in particular, as well as some of the perennials coming in. But I couldn't be happier with the bulb show in that area. So there's just one more spot I want to show you in the garden, because you see it all the time, but you never see it at this time of year. So if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know this garden. This is what I call the patio garden. This is where all the dahlias grow, many of them anyway. All the annuals grow. This is the bed that is just full of color in summer. But the problem with that is that because I plant so many dahlias and annuals in this garden, it means there are big holes here in spring. So that is where these beautiful Virginia bluebells come in, which are in full flower now and just looking so beautiful. Without these, this would be bare ground everywhere, except for, I mean, we've got some hydrangeas behind there and a few other things in there. So these are great. Now they would die back naturally if I let them, but usually I'm anxious once these are done. They do fall apart pretty quickly. Once they're done doing their thing, they sort of splay open. The leaves don't look great. So I will come in here and just cut these off at ground level. And you would think that that's not good for most plants. You know, like for instance, with bulbs, you want to leave that foliage standing to add food, have the plant create food through photosynthesis to get a nice strong bulb for next year's show. Well, this doesn't set this plant back at all. Now these are reseeders. Much of this area has filled in through reseeding. So, you know, they do move themselves around. Someone asked me, how do I control them? And my answer is I just pull them out where I don't want them. I find them charming and I really enjoy them in my garden. And in particular, it's lovely here because this garden would be really unsightly without them at this time of year. It really is a special time of year in this garden. There are so many beautiful things growing here that I had nothing to do with or that have just sort of come into their own. And it makes it a great place to start the year in. Of course, there is, you know, projects always happening everywhere around here, but it's nice to take a moment and just enjoy how pretty it's looking right now. So I hope you're having a great day in your garden, and we'll see you soon.